This module will take a look at, in depth, the two deployment models that are available in Azure, but mainly we're going to focus on the newer Azure Resource Manager, or ARM, deployment model. So what is Azure Resource Manager? Azure Resource Manager is a deployment methodology that allows you to define what it is you want for infrastructure. So you may have heard the term infrastructure as code or declarative infrastructure. You're not worrying about the workflow or the sequencing. If you're a traditional IT pro, or you've ever installed applications or set something up, if you're building a database, you've got to install the operating system, install the database server, then the database, install your app, and then configure everything. So there's a workflow that you've got to go through. And if you're going to script or automate that, if something fails, you've got to build the logic to fail back and fix it and move on. And so in the past, deployment scripts, particularly automated deployments, could get very, very complex and very complicated. What Azure Resource Manager does is allows you to define your entire deployment in a file. And that file is called an ARM, or Azure Resource Manager template. We'll look at those in a little bit in depth. But we can now define them as a file and then apply that file to an Azure subscription, effectively allowing Azure to take care of all the details of how that deployment is supposed to work. Now, there's some additional benefits of this model. If, for example, your deployment is broken, you don't need to figure out why or how. You can simply redeploy it. If you're doing test and dev, you can define the template and deploy it 3 times. Once for test, once for dev, and once for production. You can use these templates to create what are called resource groups, right? So as I take a template, I could deploy it in a group, and then the group becomes a unit for things like billing. So I can see how much I'm being charged per group. And then additionally, you can do all this with PowerShell. So in addition to being able to define the templates, you can apply the templates with PowerShell, you can download templates with PowerShell, and you can also automate all the steps with PowerShell. Now, I had mentioned a second ago this notion of what's called a resource group. A resource group is a unit within Azure, within the new portal, that contains objects. So when you deploy things with ARM templates, one of the requirements is it must be deployed into a group. The group is something you can administer and manage as a unit. I can, for example, give an administrator control over a group, and they can administer all the objects within that resource group. I can deploy the group as a template. I can check billing for the group, and perhaps the most convenient, I can delete the entire group and everything in that group in 1 click. Well, maybe 3 clicks. But 1 action, 1 operation. How does that compare to the classic portal and the older methods? Let's kind of take a quick look. Are there PowerShell modules for both? Yes, there are. Can I use declarative templates to create resources, or do I have to rely on workflow? Only the new portal allows you to do that. Can I provide role-based administration? In other words, if I have 2 applications in the portal, can I give Bob control over one and Sally control over another? With resource groups you can, the old portal you cannot. You can administer the subscription or not. Can I create compute, network, storage? Yes, you can do that in both. Can I create multiple things at the same time? Only in the new portal and only with ARM. Can I define dependencies? Only in the new portal. And then can I create policies to control what can and cannot be done? Only in the new portal. So as you can see, the classic portal and Azure Service Management, while it's still available, is not the way you want to operate. You want to work in the new portal using the Azure Resource Manager method. Now, how do you choose this? Well, it's actually very simple. Anytime you're in the new portal and you choose to create something, for example, I'm going to go new, and I'm just going to create a Windows virtual machine. Here's a Windows Server 2012 R2 virtual machine. The very first thing it's going to ask me is what's the deployment model that I want to use. And down here on the bottom, I can choose either Classic, which is the Service Manager, or the new Resource Manager deployment model. Unless you've got a very specific reason, you always want to choose the Resource Manager deployment model. So it's that simple. That's how you choose the method that you're going to use. When you choose that method, behind the scenes, it's going to leverage resource groups, ARM templates, and these newer technologies to deploy your objects within Azure. Now, we keep bringing up the notion of an ARM template. So what is that? Well, an ARM template is a text file. So many people are familiar with the notion of an XML file. Well, an ARM template is a JSON file. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And it's a very simple file that uses a predictable, the first time you see it, admittedly, it can look a little confusing, but it's a very predictable, very structured syntax that's used across many different types of services across the computing world. It's not just templates for Azure. You can find this, in many different places on many different platforms. Let's look at an actual file and kind of see what it looks like. So this is an ARM template that's loaded in Visual Studio. This is the Visual Studio Community Edition, or the free edition of Visual Studio. And if we kind of start at the top, you can see it's a fairly simple syntax where I've got some parameters, and then I've got a parameter called virtual machines, travel app server, admin password, which is going to be a string, a secure string. It's a password string. And then I've got a server name, which is also a string. And so you can see it's a very simple, structured text file format. Now, no one's expecting you to understand or know or be able to write in this format. Certainly writing ARM templates from scratch is a bit of a skill that takes some time to learn. There are, however, tools that make it quite easy. For example, this Visual Studio Community Edition has wizards and tools that allow you to build ARM templates. So I can come in here, as I get more advanced and more skilled in Azure, and I want to define, an application or an infrastructure or, any number of objects within Azure. I can come into something like Visual Studio and create that object or create that definition and then use it as the basis for a deployment. ARM templates are also used on public areas, and I say public areas, but on resources and sites like GitHub, as a method to help administrators build and deploy on Azure. So for example, because this is the preferred way of doing things, one of the things that Microsoft does is they make available on GitHub a community-driven set of templates which are called the Azure Quick Start templates. And so you can come out here on GitHub to github.com/Azure/Azure Quick Start templates, or fire up your favorite search engine. You'll land here in the first or second hit. And these are a series of community, they're not Microsoft supported, they're community supported ARM templates that deploy all sorts of combinations of services on Azure. For example, if I scroll down, here's a simple Windows virtual machine. I click on it. The Azure deploy.json file is the actual deployment definition. And I can see here's the template. And again, as I become more skilled and used to working with ARM templates, I can edit this, I can make my own copy of it, I can modify it, I can use this as the basis for my own deployment. I'm not that skilled with this, however. I just want to get a virtual machine on Azure, and I want to use this template for whatever reason. They give you a button which says deploy to Azure, you click on it, and now Azure's just going to prompt you for a couple of bits of information, those parameters, and it'll now proceed to use that template to deploy a Windows virtual machine up on Azure. And you can see this one asks for three things: a username and a password. And based on that, you'll get a copy of Windows 2012 R2 Data Center. Now you might think, well, okay, that's nice, but can't I just click New and go to a virtual machine, and won't that achieve the same thing? And the answer is, in this particular example, you're absolutely right. However, what if I want to deploy a load-balanced multi-VM network implementation? Obviously, that requires a little more knowledge. Well, fortunately, and we'll see this in some of the later modules, as we scroll through these templates, let's see if I can find this one here. I'm going to scroll through. Here's one that creates a load balancer. Here's a load balancer with 2 network cards connected to 2 different networks. So these templates provide you a great starting point for not just creating singular objects in Azure, but creating entire collections of objects that are all properly configured to talk to each other. For example, this 2 VMs with an internal load balancer, if I click on it and then I go to this visualize button, it's going to show me a visual representation of what that's going to create. And what you'll see is that this is a little more elaborate. We've got virtual machines, network interfaces, and internal load balancers, this is the internal load balancer over here, connected to storage accounts and networks. So there's a lot more going on than just creating a virtual machine. That's where the power of these ARM templates actually comes in. GitHub's a great repository. It's not the only one. You can also create templates offline if you're skilled at it. You can store templates directly inside your subscription. For example, you define a template, but you don't want that template out in the public. What do you do with it? Well, within your subscription, there's a templates node where you can actually see templates you've uploaded. So these are my corporate templates. Okay, let's take a look at a quick example of using an ARM template to actually deploy some objects in one of my Azure subscriptions. And to get started, I'm going to use the quick start templates that we talked about. And so to find this, you can just pick a search engine, type Azure quick start templates, and one of the search results will take you to this site right here. And you can browse through all the available templates. There's a lot in here that are basically community driven. We're just going to pick the first one on the list, which is a Visual Studio Development VM. So it's a new virtual machine that has Visual Studio installed so that I can start writing code. So we'll click on it. It's going to take us out to some information on the template. We can see that it needs a username and a password, a version of Visual Studio, and then the DNS name that you want to use to access the virtual machine. It also gives you some PowerShell and some command line commands, if that's the way that you want to do it. So it really makes it real simple and real easy. We're simply going to click the Deploy to Azure button. That's going to take us to our Azure portal. Now I've already logged on to the portal, so it's going to go right there. Prompt me for the parameters, and that's basically it. So here's the template. Here's the parameters. We're going to go ahead and fill these in. So I'm going to call this one sysadmin, a password, a version of Visual Studio, and I'm going to pick the Visual Studio Professional 2015, and a public DNS name. So chdevwork01. Click OK on that. Choose my subscription, create a new resource group. Let's call this one Dev Tools, a region, and then we accept the legal terms saying that, hey, by doing this, you may wind up spending money. And we're now ready to launch the deployment. And so that's going to submit the deployment to Azure, and in, depending on the load, in 4 or 5 minutes, I'll have a brand new virtual machine with developer tools installed. Now, the thing to realize is that it's going to create a number of objects up in Azure that you'll see when this deployment completes, but because I'm using the template, I don't have to worry about all the definitions of those objects. The template brings all the different settings, all the dependencies, all the configurations together, so you're simply supplying those couple of simple inputs. There's a link which says learn more on GitHub. We'll click on that. It's going to take us to the actual storage location for that template. And so we can see here's the files that make up the template. We've got a README with some notes and documentation. We have an Azure deploy.json file. This is the actual template itself. If we click on it, we can see here in JSON notation, which is just a file structure, all the different settings that are used to build the objects in Azure. Now this is a particularly simple one. It simply has a virtual machine with some networking on it and a copy of Visual Studio installed. But if we kind of start at the top and scroll down through, we can see where it prompts us for a password. It gives us a list of available versions of Visual Studio, asks us the question to pick the version, and then creates all the different settings that Azure needs to deploy these different objects. Let's go back and take a look and see if our deployment's completed yet. Click on Resource Groups. And here's our new DevTools resource group. And inside this resource group, I now have a running virtual machine. So it's still loading the status information here, but there we go. So it's still in the process of being created. So the virtual machine is not finished with its initial sysprep setup yet. But that's how you leverage a template from the Azure Quick Start templates to deploy new objects in Azure. Now, the next logical question that people who look at this for the first time ask is, well, that's using a template that's stored on GitHub. What if I'm a company and I want to have all my own templates? I don't want to store them in a public repository like GitHub. I want to, build my own templates and keep them for just my staff and my administrators to use. Well, that's also pretty simple to do. Within Azure, there's a templates area. And if you click on it, it'll show you templates that you have for your organization. Now, I've already created a couple of templates in here, but it's a real simple thing to do. We click Add. We give it a name. The name can't have any spaces in it. And then we write the definition of the template. Now, writing an ARM template from scratch is a little bit of a more advanced topic, and there are tools available such as Visual Studio, the Community Edition, the free version, that have wizards and editing tools that let someone who knows a little more about Azure and wants to build their own templates. It simplifies the process of going in and building these ARM templates. But assuming that you know how to do it, you could write it in a place like Visual Studio, then just copy paste it in here. I could take, for example, code from GitHub, just copy paste all this template material, modify it, and use it to create my own templates. I'm going to cancel this one and go back and look at one I created earlier. So I've got one here for a simple VM deployment. If I click on it, we can actually see the template that's used. And so this is all the JSON notation that describes how to deploy just a simple VM in Azure and all the associated properties and parameters that we're going to use with it. Deploying this template, in other words, creating a VM based on this template, is simply a matter of clicking the deploy button for the template. I'll close a couple of these open blades just to clean up the screen, and we'll click deploy. Now we're on a very similar experience to what we had a few minutes ago with our dev template. It's going to ask us for our parameters, an admin username, and a password. And then the version of the operating system that we want to deploy. Use an existing resource group. We'll just put this one in the DevTools group that we created before. Accept the legal terms. And we're now set to go. Click Create. And it will submit a deployment for another virtual machine that's going to go in that exact same resource group. So again, two ways that you can do this. You can use templates that are stored in public or external repositories like GitHub, like within Visual Studio, or for your corporate or your enterprise Azure subscription, there's an area within the subscription where you can store your own templates and conduct your own deployments from there to keep them in a central managed location. Now in this final module for our Introduction to Azure course, we're going to take some time and look at Azure PowerShell. You'll recall in the beginning I mentioned that this is a critical piece to Azure. There's a lot of things that you can only do in PowerShell, and there's a lot of the automation that is only ever really shown in PowerShell. So you've got to be comfortable with being able to read and understand PowerShell, and not just PowerShell in general, but the way that PowerShell relates back to Azure. So to begin, let's kind of take a look at what are called the Azure PowerShell modules. Now, PowerShell in and of itself is extended through the addition of modules. When you have a simple Windows system, you have PowerShell on it, but you don't necessarily have the ability to administer Azure. In order to be able to install and administer Azure, you've got to download and install the Azure PowerShell modules. Now, how do you do this? You get this through something called the Web Platform Installer. So you can go online, you can pick your favorite search engine, and you can fire up and look for the Web Platform Installer. The Web Platform Installer is going to have a list of all the different components. One of them is going to be the Azure PowerShell modules. Click on Add, it'll download and install them. You restart PowerShell, and you now have access to the entire library of Azure PowerShell commandlets in both the standard PowerShell interface and in PowerShell ISE. So let's go take a quick look at that. Windows PowerShell ISE makes it pretty easy to find all these different assorted Azure PowerShell commandlets and kind of work with them in a visual way. Here I've got PowerShell ISE open, and I've got my command pane visible on the right-hand side of the screen. This little button right here opens and closes the command pane. The modules drop-down shows me all the installed modules that are on this system. You can see I've got a bunch of Azure modules. I've got a basic Azure module, an Azure storage module, and then a whole list of Azure Resource Manager PowerShell modules. Now, it takes time to get familiar with what's stored in each module, but for example, compute is where I would find things for virtual machines. You can see a command, get Azure RM VM, which is going to list all the virtual machines in a particular resource group. Double click it, and it helps me build a new command, so I don't have to worry about knowing what the different syntax elements are, despite the discoverability of PowerShell. So the name of the VM I'm going to look at is VM2. The resource group name is going to be DevTools. And then I just click Run, and it'll go run that command for me. And then you can see the output is everything about that VM, VM2, from my resource group, DevTools. And it takes some time. You want to, obviously browse through and, get familiar with these commands. And as you work with Azure and as you do different things and they reference PowerShell, you can always come back to this view in the ISE to make it real simple to help you build out, eventually some fairly complex Azure PowerShell commands. Now, one of the top questions is often, well, how do I get these Azure PowerShell commands? If you download the Microsoft Web Platform Installer, which is a simple search to find it on Microsoft's website, just search for Web Platform Installer. Here's where you can actually add Azure PowerShell to your system. And you'll want to come back and check this periodically because they, as with any cloud platform, Azure's updated fairly frequently. As they update Azure, they also update the different PowerShell libraries. And so we can see that I've actually got an update pending right now. So I'll just click Add and Install, and it's going to go download the latest Azure PowerShell library, which may take advantage of some new features that have recently been released, some bug fixes or some enhancements. So there it is, real simple, real straightforward, Azure PowerShell within PowerShell ISE. Okay, let's look at some examples of Azure Classic modules, or I should say Azure Classic commandlets. Now, bear in mind, these use the Azure Service Manager deployment model. In other words, for things you're going to administer and manage via the Classic portal, these are some examples of commandlets that you might use. So we can add Azure account. That's going to log you on in PowerShell to your subscription. You can then configure your subscription. So one of the commands you'll run is set or get Azure subscription. One of the tasks that you would typically do is run set Azure subscription and set a default storage container. Now, before you can set a default storage container, you may need to create a storage account, new Azure storage account, or create a new Azure storage container. Once you've got the storage account and container, maybe you're going to make a service or a new -Azure VM. So pretty straightforward. All these commands follow standard PowerShell syntax, and if you were going to go in and stand up a new virtual machine in Azure using the Classic portal or the Service Manager module, that sequence of commandlets you can follow on this slide right here is really the sequence of commands that you're going to run. So let's take a look at some of this. Now we'll move on to the Azure Resource Manager deployment model. So these commandlets, again, very similar set of commandlets, but now we're using the Azure Resource Manager tools. So this is the new portal. The difference, if you look at these commandlets right away, is the addition of the RM letters. So instead of login Azure account, it's login Azure RM account. You've got to remember this difference, because if you, for example, log in Azure account, but then try to create an Azure RM VM, it's going to fail. It's going to tell you you're not logged in. You're going to sit there going, but I am. You have to use the right set of commandlets for the deployment model that you're going to use. So continuing down, get subscription, create a resource group. And then if we have a template that represents the objects we want to deploy, we can use the new Azure RM resource group deployment commandlet and simply reference the template, and it will actually install or deploy all the resources in the template into the resource group specified in that commandlet.
Hi there, this is Seth Juarez here at Ritesh. How you doing, my friend?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Good. You're going to be talking about how to diagnose and troubleshoot issues on Azure.
Yeah, firstly, thank you for having us here. So, as you know, as engineers, when we develop and manage software, one of the top things is how you can make sure the software is resilient to failures. And if failures happen, because hardware breaks or software fails, how you can resolve, diagnose, and mitigate those issues and make sure they don't occur again. So towards that, and the issues can vary from connectivity issue to like a transient performance issue, or it could be like a simple how-to question, or you're trying a cloud service and you're running into configuration issue or management issue. In all those scenarios, you're trying to figure out how to solve those issues. You do like a general internet search, you try to figure out the tools, the solutions, you try them out. If they don't work, you try something more. If they don't work out, then the end is you're trying to find an Azure expert who can help you. So at Azure Support, we are trying to improve that experience for our customers and users every day. And today I'm going to show you some of those experiences that we have built within the Azure portal, where basically within the Azure portal, within your resource context, now our users can get access to authoritative troubleshooting tools, guided solutions with inline actions, steps, and if they don't work out, then easily get additional help. So let's start.
Let's dive in, yeah.
Yep. So I will pick a Linux VM because, as you know, in Azure we love Linux. There is a variety of Linux distributions we support: Red Hat, Ubuntu, CentOS, and FreeBSD as of yesterday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's like first class guest operating system, which is optimized for Azure, and you can run your network appliances FreeBSD based now on Azure. So suppose you have an issue with Linux VM where you're not able to connect to the VM. So you come to your VM within the management portal, and now what you see is within the management portal there is a new support and troubleshooting section, and as the section name says, the intent is to find, troubleshoot solutions, tools, and get help if you're not able to solve the issue. So let's dive in. So the first thing is the troubleshoot blade. As you open the blade, this blade is basically asking you what is the type of problem you have, and we curate this list of the problems from what we hear from the customers, and we keep on refreshing them. And if your issue is not listed, then you can always choose the new support request and get more help. So let's pick up that I'm not able to connect to my Linux VM. And what it does is now it is giving you a guided step-by-step experience to diagnose the issue and mitigate the issue. So the first step it tells is, let's check the resource health. What resource health does is, it basically gathers all the telemetry within the Azure infrastructure, right from the fabric to the host operating system software, if there is any power loss or if there is any network failure, and tries to see if there is any issue on the Azure side for that VM. And in this case, it says the Azure platform is working perfectly and there is nothing affecting this virtual machine. So this is all good. So next is, it suggests let's look at the boot diagnostics, which is basically let's look if the guest operating system came up cleanly, or if there was an issue and it came up like a network adapter error or something. and it basically what it does is it gives you the access to your serial log of the Linux VM. Previously this was not available and you had to call us to get the access to this data, but now it is all available within the portal.
I like the fact that not only are you telling us the recommended steps, but you're providing, like I could just click on it and go to the exact blade that has what I need.
That's our aim is to make you very easily and quickly diagnose and mitigate the issues.
Sure.
And that's our key aim. So right over here now you can see, you can go down and see what were the logs, and if it came up cleanly. Over here you see that yep, everything finished fine, you don't see any networking error. That means this is not an issue. The next step it tells us that one of the general issues when you're not able to connect is having an authentication error, so you can restart the password. Other things is you can try to restart the VM if that can solve the issue. And the last thing which we tell the customers is redeploy, which is a new capability added. Basically this moves your VM to another host so that it eliminates any issues on the Azure side. And we definitely take it seriously. When you run this, we take a dump of your VM before and after to understand why didn't we catch that your VM was in a weird state and we didn't auto heal, or why did our resource health, the step 1 didn't catch it.
So if someone's actually using number 5, we know in the back end something really is wrong. Let's see what's going on here.
What's going on.
That's
and
awesome.
Yep, because we want to make sure our systems are reliable and highly, we want to learn as we encounter new issues,
Sure.
definitely. So those are the steps, and if those steps don't help, then you can always reach out to us for more help. You can press the new support request, and over here the good thing is over here it captures a lot of your resource context information and it pre-populates right over there. It passes that to the support engineer so that they can quickly understand, diagnose and resolve the issue. And this definitely requires you to have a support plan, but as you know, we offer a variety of support plan that go from like developer plan to enterprise grade plan. And the developer plan is a great value, is just like $29 per month, and you get unlimited technical assistance access to us. So I think, and if those don't work out, you can always reach out to us at MSGN forum or even on
Right.
Twitter. So, yep.
That's amazing because that, I mean, you're spending that much on your Starbucks in a
Exactly.
week.
And you get access to the technical resources and so much more advisory. So, yep.
Love it.
Let's take another example. So this troubleshoot experience is now available across 13 products within the Azure family, and we keep on expanding it to more and more products, and we keep on updating this experience and those issues as we find new, as we build new tools. So let's take another example. Maybe let's take a Azure SQL database, and one of the common issues with the database is slowness. It's my database is slow, it's not performing. You don't know it is which query, it is what the issue is. So the Azure SQL team has done a great job that you can just go to the troubleshoot blade, you can pick an issue, say my database is slow, and then it gives you guided experience on how to diagnose and mitigate and resolve such complex scenarios also. It basically gives the structure to your troubleshooting experience, so you don't have to struggle to find the authoritative way to troubleshoot. And there is no dead end. When you know that these things don't help, you can reach us for help. And if you don't have a support plan, you can still reach us for help through forums and Twitter. So in this case, it guides you to some query performance. You can click on it, it will show you all the queries running on this database and which ones are slow and how you can optimize them. The next, it will try to advise you of some indexes that can potentially help you to again speed up your database. And if those don't help, this points you to an article where you can try to understand more detailed metrics and resources and try to see if anything is throttled or constrained. And last is you can always scale up or scale out, which is a quick mitigation, but you want to understand and resolve the root cause.
So this is interesting because now I'm noticing that the troubleshoot experience is also tailored to the service that it's attached to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's tailored to the service and it is tailored to the resource that you're running. So it's tailored even to the specific resource, like you saw the resource health. It's very specific.
And then beyond that, it's also looking at performance counters of your own service and how it's doing, right?
it's peaking not just in the Azure infrastructure, but also your application and
That's right.
software at times where we can.
Yeah.
And as you open it up. Yeah. Awesome. I think this is all you had to offer. Sure. Yeah.
This is pretty amazing. So usually the dev process would be, let's go search on Stack Overflow for 2 hours, find something that doesn't work, and then go again.
Yeah.
Here we have the option to actually know, because my sense is that you're getting these questions all the time, and so you're optimizing the troubleshooting with the questions that you're already getting.
Exactly. And our aim is for you to use Azure with confidence, even if it is when you're experimenting or running mission critical workload on it, that you can always be assured that we are there to help you in that entire journey as you run into issues. It can be simple how-to issues, configuration issues, or performance issues. We want to provide you the tools, the recipes, the solutions, and if they don't work, how to get more help.
Fantastic. Well, we've been learning about the Azure troubleshooting experience. My name is Seth Juarez. Thanks for watching.
As IT transforms at an unprecedented rate, you need a management solution that can keep pace with your challenges now and in the future. The Microsoft Operations Management Suite, OMS, is the simplified IT management solution for any enterprise, built to manage and protect all your environments regardless of location, operating system, hypervisors, or cloud provider choices. OMS leverages cloud-scale resources, extending System Center capabilities to unleash modern IT management scenarios, delivering new, faster ways to solve and prevent problems with streamlined operations. OMS delivers a rich set of ready-made solutions that help manage and protect your Windows and Linux workloads across your data center, Azure, AWS, OpenStack, and VMware environments. OMS lets you spot problems fast and troubleshoot issues quick with effortless centralized log collection, integrated search, and analysis through custom dashboards. With OMS, you have a unified solution for protecting your critical systems and applications. Cloud-integrated backup and easy-to-manage recovery points eliminate the chance of data loss in case of disaster and provide a reliable business continuity solution for both physical and virtual machines, on-premises or in the cloud. OMS enhances security and compliance by quickly recognizing missing system updates, assessing the risk and health of workloads like SQL and Active Directory, collecting security-related events for forensic, audit, and breach analyses, and identifying configuration changes that pinpoint operational issues across your entire hybrid environment. You can also automate complex operations and take control of your environment by remediating operational issues. Born in the cloud, OMS delivers features on continuous cloud cadence, providing the IT professionals superior operational visibility, agility, and service levels at lower costs. Microsoft Operations Management Suite is the all-in-one IT management solution for any enterprise managing any workload on premises or on any cloud.